The first sign that the wedding was going to collapse was not the groom missing from the altar. It was the way Sophie Bennett looked at me from the back of the aisle and smiled like she already knew. Not a happy smile. Not the bright, practiced one she had worn all morning for photographers, cousins, bridesmaids, and her mother's church friends who kept saying things like, "Finally, sweetheart." No, this was the tiny, crooked smile Sophie had given me in college when the vending machine stole her last dollar and she said, "Well, Evan, I guess dinner's canceled." The smile that meant something terrible is happening, and if I don't laugh, I might break. My name is Evan Porter. I was 33 years old that June afternoon, standing under a white wooden arch at a winery outside Asheville, wearing a charcoal suit that felt too tight across the shoulders and holding two rings that did not belong to me. I worked as a restoration carpenter, which meant I was better with old houses than with emotional disasters. Give me water damage, cracked plaster, a sagging porch beam, and I could tell you exactly where to put my hands. Give me my best friend, walking toward a man who might not deserve her, and I had spent 6 months pretending I didn't know where to look. Sophie was 32, a graphic designer with ink on her fingers more often than not, a laugh that made bartenders give her free fries, and a stubborn little dent between her eyebrows whenever she was trying not to cry. We had been best friends for 11 years. 11 years of bad coffee, late-night phone calls, flat tires, work celebrations, family funerals, birthday pancakes, and the kind of friendship people called basically marriage, while we both laughed too hard and changed the subject. I had told myself that was enough. A mature man respects boundaries. A decent friend does not confess love to a woman 3 weeks before her wedding just because he suddenly understands the word regret. So I stood beside Trevor Hale, her fiancé, when he asked me to be a groomsman because Sophie insisted. I smiled in photos. I tied bow ties. I handed Trevor breath mints when he smelled like bourbon at noon. And 5 minutes before the ceremony, when Sophie found me in the hallway outside the bridal suite, she put one hand on my lapel and said, "Tell me I look okay?" She looked like every bad decision I had ever avoided. Her dress was simple, satin, no glitter, no enormous train. Her dark hair was pinned low, a few soft pieces loose around her face. There was a pearl at her throat that had belonged to her grandmother. She smelled like orange blossoms and nerves. "You look," I started. She lifted one eyebrow. "Careful. If you say nice, I'll throw this bouquet at your head." I swallowed. "You look like the reason someone invented vows." For half a second, the hallway changed. The noise from the guests faded. The bridesmaids laughing inside the suite disappeared. Sophie's fingers tightened lightly on my jacket, and her eyes searched mine like she had heard the sentence underneath the sentence. Then she looked away first. "Don't say things like that today," she whispered. "I know." "No, you don't." She smoothed my lapel, even though it was already smooth. "You say things like that and then you stand 3 feet back where nobody can reach you." That hit close enough that I pretended to check my cuff. Sophie gave a quiet laugh, but it trembled. "Sorry, bride nerves. I'm apparently doing emotional drive-bys now." "You've always done emotional drive-bys. And you've always survived them." "Barely." She smiled again, real this time, and touched my wrist. Just 2 fingers. Warm, familiar, dangerous. Then her mother called her name and the moment snapped. That was the last quiet second before everything went wrong. The ceremony began at 4 o'clock. The string quartet played something soft and expensive. Rows of white chairs faced the mountains. Guests turned in their seats with phones tucked discreetly in their laps, even though the invitation had said "Unplugged Ceremony" in gold letters. Trevor stood under the arch beside me, pale and sweating. At first, I thought it was normal. Men got nervous. I had repaired enough bathroom doors after bachelor parties to know groom panic was its own weather system. But then he checked his phone. Once, twice wouldn't ging. A third time, while the officiant cleared his throat. His brother Dylan stepped behind the arch and whispered, "Trevor." Trevor did not answer. The music shifted. The bridesmaids came down the aisle in sage green. Sophie's niece dropped petals in serious handfuls like she was salting a driveway. Then everyone stood. Sophie appeared on her father's arm, and for one reckless second, my whole body forgot whose wedding it was. She saw Trevor first, then me. And there it was again, that small, crooked smile. Halfway down the aisle, Trevor's phone buzzed so loudly I heard it over the quartet. He looked at the screen, his face emptied. I leaned toward him. "Put it away," he whispered. "I can't do this." I thought I misheard him. "What?" "I can't." Sophie was 10 steps away. Trevor turned, pushed past his brother, and walked off the platform. Not fast, not dramatic. That would almost have been better. He just walked away like he had remembered he'd left the stove on. A murmur moved through the guests. Sophie stopped. Her father said something to her. She did not move. Her bouquet trembled once in her hands, then went still. I stared after Trevor, waiting for him to turn around, laugh, apologize, blame heatstroke, blame anything. He disappeared through the side door of the winery. The quartet died note by note. 200 people sat in a silence so thick it had weight. Sophie's mother made a sound like a wounded bird. Someone in the third row whispered, "Oh my God." A phone camera rose, then another. That was what moved me. Not Trevor leaving. The phones. The hungry little lift of them, as if Sophie's worst moment had become weather worth recording. I stepped down from the platform and walked up the aisle toward her. I had no plan. I had only the sudden, furious certainty that she should not be standing there alone while people decided what shape her humiliation should take. Sophie watched me come. Her eyes were shiny, but her chin was up. When I reached her, she gave a breathless little laugh. Did he really just exit stage left? Pretty much. Points for clean blocking. Sophie. I know, she blinked hard. If you say you're sorry, I might actually cry, so don't. I looked at her father. Mr. Bennett, may I? He hesitated, then released her arm. Sophie's hand slipped into mine. Not because she was collapsing. Not because she needed holding up. Because she chose it. Her fingers locked around mine with the same pressure she used when dragging me through crowded concerts, farmers markets, and one truly regrettable haunted corn maze. Familiar. Certain. The officiant leaned toward us, lost. Should we pause? Sophie looked out at the crowd. Her face flushed deep pink. Her grip tightened. I heard Trevor's mother whisper, "This is so embarrassing." Something in Sophie's eyes cracked, and something in me finally stopped behaving. I turned toward the room. He left, I said, my voice carrying more than I expected. That's on him, not her. The murmuring quieted. I could feel Sophie staring at me. I faced her then, and the words came out before fear could edit them. If he won't marry you, I said, then I will. A gasp moved through the chairs. Sophie's mouth parted. Her father whispered, Evan? The officiant blinked rapidly. Legally speaking, we can't simply— I know, I said, not taking my eyes off Sophie. I'm not asking for paperwork. I'm asking for one honest minute. Her bouquet lowered. Her hand was still in mine. For 11 years, I had known the exact shape of Sophie's silence. Annoyed silence, tired silence, hungry silence. The silence before she made a joke so sharp it should have required a permit. This was different. This silence had a door in it. Sophie looked down at our joined hands, then back at my face. In front of her family, her friends, his family, and every person who had just watched her be abandoned, she whispered, Evan, are you saving me? My throat tightened. No, I said, I'm choosing you. Her eyes filled completely then. And before I could decide whether I had just ruined our friendship, Sophie stepped closer, lifted her chin and said, just loud enough for the front row to hear, then ask me like you mean it. Ask me like you mean it. Sophie said it with mascara shining at the edges of her eyes and a bouquet sagging in one hand, while 200 people held their breath, around us. For one terrible second, I forgot every word I had ever learned. Then Sophie's thumb brushed over my knuckles. Not hard, not pleading, a challenge. There she was, my best friend. The woman who once argued with a parking meter for eating her quarter. The woman who had shown up at my apartment after my dad died with soup, clean socks, and the audacity to say, "You can be tragic after you hydrate." She had just been left at the altar and she was still daring me to be brave. So I lowered myself to one knee. The guests inhaled as one body. Sophie's lips parted, and for the first time all day, the look on her face had nothing to do with Trevor Hale. It was just us. "Sophie Bennett," I said, voice rough, "I have loved you in every ordinary way a man can love someone before he admits it to himself." Her fingers tightened around mine. "I loved you when you stole fries off my plate and called it a tax. I loved you when you made me dance in your kitchen during that thunderstorm because you said lightning was less scary with choreography." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I loved you when you cried on my porch after your first big client fired you and then got mad at me for offering solutions instead of brownies." A shaky laugh moved through the front row. Sophie gave me a watery glare. "You did deserve that," she whispered. "I did." I smiled up at her. "I loved you when you met Trevor because you were happy and I thought loving you meant stepping back." Her face changed at his name, but only for a heartbeat. Then she focused on me. "So here's me not stepping back anymore." I drew a breath. I don't know what happens after today. I don't know if this is insane or overdue or both, but if you want one honest minute, I'll give you every honest minute I have left. The officiant made a soft sound behind me that might have been a sob. I should have stopped there. A wise man would have stopped there. But Sophie had asked me to mean it. So I said, "Marry me someday if you want. Don't marry me if you don't. But let me love you out loud from this moment on." The world went silent again. Sophie looked down at me for what felt like an entire lifetime. Then she dropped her bouquet. It hit the aisle with a soft thud. She put both hands on my face. "Evan Porter," she said, her voice trembling, "you absolute idiot." Someone choked. I laughed once, helplessly. That's not traditionally a yes. No, because traditionally people say these things before I buy $12,000 worth of peonies. "I'll reimburse the peonies." "You cannot afford the peonies." "Probably not." Her thumbs moved along my cheekbones and her eyes softened in a way I had dreamed about and punished myself for dreaming. "I loved you too," she whispered. My heart stopped. Not always neatly, not always bravely, but I did. And I told myself friendship was safer because you were the one person I couldn't survive losing. I rose slowly because my knees no longer worked. We stood close enough that the pearl at her throat brushed my tie. "Sophie," I said, "if you make me cry in front of my Aunt Judith, I'll haunt you." "You're already crying." "Then kiss me before she takes a picture." I didn't move at first. I needed to know this wasn't shock. Grief. A beautiful, catastrophic reaction to humiliation. Sophie understood. Of course she did. She slid one hand around the back of my neck and stepped into me, closing the last inch herself. "Evan," she said softly, "I'm choosing you too." That was all I needed. I kissed her in the aisle where another man had abandoned her. Not a performance, not a rescue, not some grand declaration for the people watching. It started soft, almost careful. Her lips were warm and shaking. My hand found her waist, satin smooth under my palm, and she made a tiny sound that broke something loose in my chest. Then she kissed me back. Really kissed me. Like she had been waiting in the same impossible room I had, both of us leaning against opposite walls, pretending we didn't know where the door was. Applause began somewhere behind us. Then more. Then the entire vineyard seemed to erupt. Sophie pulled back, laughing through tears, forehead pressed to mine. "Well," she whispered, "that escalated." "I'm sorry. Don't you dare apologize. I just proposed at your wedding. You also improved it." I laughed, and she did too, and that sound, Sophie laughing against my mouth in a wedding dress meant for someone else, became the first true thing of the day. The officiant cleared his throat. "Would anyone like me to say something?" Sophie looked at me, eyebrows lifted. I shook my head quickly. "No illegal ceremonies." "Coward." "Responsible adult." "Debatable." Her father stepped toward us, eyes wet. Soph? She turned, and I felt her brace, but Mr. Bennet only opened his arms. She folded into him, and for a moment I let go of her hand. Only a moment, because as soon as she stepped back, she reached for me again. Her mother was crying too hard to speak, which might have been mercy. Trevor's parents had vanished. Half the guests looked delighted, half scandalized, and Aunt Judith was absolutely taking pictures. Sophie leaned close to my ear. Get me out of here. Where? I don't care, somewhere with no centerpieces. So we ran. Not gracefully. She had a train. I had dress shoes with no traction. Her niece cheered like we were escaping a bank robbery. We slipped through the side vineyard path behind the reception tent, past barrels, fairy lights, and rows of grapes, turning gold in the sun. Only when we reached the old stone tasting room did Sophie stop. The music had restarted faintly behind us, someone making a heroic attempt to salvage cocktail hour. Sophie bent over, laughing and breathing hard. I lost a shoe. I looked down. You did. I'm a runaway bride with one shoe. Very symbolic. You want me to find it? No. She straightened, cheeks flushed. I want 5 minutes where nobody is staring at me. I opened the tasting room door. Inside it was cool and dim, smelling of oak and citrus cleaner. Long wooden tables lined the walls. Sunlight fell through high windows in pale rectangles. Sophie walked to the nearest table and sat on the edge, dress spilling around her like moonlight. For the first time since the aisle, her smile faded. I stood a few feet away. Are you okay? No. She looked at me. But I'm more okay than I should be. I don't want to be the reason you skip over what happened. You're not. She rubbed at a tear with the heel of her hand. Trevor leaving hurt. It embarrassed me. It made me feel stupid. You're not stupid. I know. She gave me a small, fierce look. That's the thing. Deep down, I think I knew. I think I was walking toward a life I could explain instead of one I wanted. My chest ached. And then you were there, she said, saying the one thing I had been too scared to imagine. I stepped closer. I meant it. I know. Her voice softened. That's what scares me. I stopped between her knees, not touching her until she reached for my tie and tugged me in. So, she said, trying for teasing and only half succeeding, if we're going to be scandalous, we need rules. Rules? 1, no pretending this didn't happen tomorrow. Agreed. 2, no noble speeches about giving me space and disappearing for 6 weeks. I winced. She narrowed her eyes. You were already planning one. Maybe a small one. Forbidden. Yes, ma'am. Her mouth curved. 3, you're taking me on a real date. Tonight? She looked down at her wedding dress, then back at me. Too soon? No. I stepped closer until her knees framed my hips. I've been waiting 11 years. Tonight is fine. Her smile trembled. Then she pulled me down and kissed me again. Slow this time, private, with one barefoot brushing my ankle and her hands in my hair. When she broke away breathless, she whispered, For the record, I was hoping you'd say something before I got to the altar. I rested my forehead against hers. For the record, I said, so was I. We did not make it to the reception. Sophie's mother found us in the tasting room 20 minutes later, took one look at Sophie sitting on a table with my tie loosened in her hand and said, Well, at least someone is kissing the bride. Sophie made a strangled sound. Mom! Mrs. Bennet dabbed under her eyes with a napkin. What? I've had 3 glasses of champagne, and your Aunt Judith is telling everyone she predicted this in 2018. She did not. She says there was tension over potato salad. Coughed. Sophie pointed at me. Do not validate her. Mrs. Bennet's expression softened. Sweetheart, the guests are eating. Your father is handling the Hales. Trevor is gone. There it was. The name like a cold spoon against warm skin. Sophie's hand slipped from my tie to my palm. Did he say anything? She asked. Her mother hesitated. Only that he was sorry. Sophie looked down. Efficient. I squeezed her fingers once. Mrs. Bennet noticed. Of course she did. Mothers notice everything, especially the things you think you're hiding. Evan, she said. Yes, ma'am. If you break her heart after this, I'll put you in the ground beneath my hydrangeas. Sophie groaned. Mom, I'm just being clear. I understand, I said. Mrs. Bennet studied me for another second, then nodded. Good. Now take my daughter somewhere she can breathe. Sophie slid off the table. That's exactly what we were doing. In a tasting room? We were breathing romantically. I choked again. Her mother pressed a hand to her chest. I'm going back to the champagne. After she left, Sophie stared at the closed door, then turned to me. Still want that date? More than I want oxygen. Dangerous line, but acceptable. We escaped through a service exit with the help of a sympathetic catering manager named Jean, who gave Sophie a pair of white kitchen clogs and me a paper bag full of sliders. Every love story needs snacks, Jean said solemnly. Sophie clutched the bag to her chest. Jean understands me. My truck was parked behind the vineyard, dusty and entirely inappropriate for a bride in satin. I opened the passenger door and immediately saw 3 receipts, a measuring tape, and a half-empty bottle of windshield fluid on the floor. Wow, Sophie said. Our carriage. I can clean it. She hiked up her dress and climbed in. Don't you dare, this is authentic. I helped gather the layers of satin so they wouldn't catch in the door. My hand brushed her calf by accident and we both went still. It should not have felt new. I had known her for 11 years. I had seen her with the flu, with paint in her hair, with a sunburn shaped like sunglasses. I had carried her asleep from my couch once after movie night, but touching her now with permission humming between us changed everything. Sophie looked down at me from the passenger seat, cheeks pink. Evan. Yeah? If you keep looking at me like that, we're never getting dinner. I'm looking respectfully. You are absolutely not. I shut the door before I did something truly reckless in a parking lot behind a winery. We drove away as the sun lowered over the mountains, her veil abandoned somewhere, her one real shoe lost to history, the kitchen clog squeaking whenever she shifted. For a few miles, neither of us spoke. Then Sophie reached into the paper bag and handed me a slider. First date dinner. I accepted it. Classy. I'm still technically wearing couture. This is elevated. Technically wearing someone else's wedding plan. She looked at me sideways. I winced. Too soon? No. She took a small bite of her slider. True. We ended up at a scenic overlook above the Blue Ridge because every restaurant within 30 miles would have required explanations, and Sophie had reached her explanation limit. I spread an old moving blanket over the truck bed. She sat beside me, dress pooled everywhere, clogs kicked off, bare toes painted pale pink. We ate sliders and watched the sky turn peach. This is a terrible first date, I said. Sophie leaned against my shoulder. It's the best first date I've ever had. That's concerning. My last first date involved Trevor explaining cryptocurrency for 40 minutes. I withdraw my concern. She laughed softly, then quieted. I waited. That was one thing I had learned with Sophie. She would joke until she found the safe edge of pain, then circle it twice, then finally step in. I thought love was supposed to feel like choosing the sensible thing, she said. I turned my head toward her. With Trevor, it made sense. He had a plan. He wanted the same neighborhood, same timeline, same tasteful gray sofa. She picked at the blanket. Everyone kept saying how lucky I was. You don't have to explain. I want to, her shoulder pressed more, firmly into mine. With you, nothing made sense. You leave sawdust in your hair. Your house has 7 unfinished projects. You think soup is a meal even when it's just hot water with ambition. That was one time. It was broth, Evan. It had parsley. It had sadness. She smiled, then looked at me with such tenderness my chest hurt. But with you, I never had to audition. I could be tired, mean, hungry, brilliant, petty, scared. You saw all of it and stayed. I wanted to stay. I know, her voice dropped. That's why I was afraid to ask for more. The wind moved over the overlook, cool against my overheated skin. I turned my body toward hers. Ask now. Her eyes searched mine. For what? Anything. Sophie's breath caught. Then, slowly, she lifted her hand and set it against my chest, right over my heart. Don't make me be brave alone, she whispered. I covered her hand with mine. Never again. She leaned in first. The kiss was quieter than the ones before. No applause, no shock. Just sunset, satin, and the taste of stolen reception food. She kissed me like she was asking a question. I kissed her like I had already given the answer years ago. When we parted, she kept her forehead against my jaw. I don't want to go home yet. Okay. And I don't want to go back there. Okay. And I really don't want to sleep in the bridal suite Trevor booked with champagne and rose petals and probably some horrifying towel swans. We can avoid towel swans. She smiled against my neck. Hero. I pulled out my phone. I can get 2 rooms at the inn near Hendersonville. She lifted her head. 2? I'm trying to be honorable. That sounds exhausting. Sophie. I'm not saying I'm ready for everything. Her face flushed, but she didn't look away. I'm saying I don't want a wall between us tonight. My pulse kicked hard. We can get 1 room, I said carefully, and I'll sleep on the floor. She gave me a look. You are 6'2" and emotionally repressed. You'll wake up shaped like a question mark. Probably. 1 room, she said, no disappearing, no speeches. We figure out the rest like adults. Adults who ate wedding sliders in a truck bed. Romantic adults. I kissed her knuckles. 1 room. Her phone buzzed then, sharp and ugly against the blanket. We both looked down. Trevor. Sophie went still. The screen lit with a message preview. Please, I made a mistake. We need to talk. For a moment, the mountains seemed to hold their breath with us. Then Sophie turned the phone face down. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice even. You don't have to answer. I know. Her eyes met mine, clear and shaken, but not confused. I'll deal with him, she said. But not from the middle of our first date. Our one small word, one entire future cracking open. She picked up the last slider, tore it in half, and handed me the bigger piece. Now, she said, leaning back against my side, tell me about this inn and whether they have desserts. I wrapped an arm around her, and this time she settled into me without hesitation. They have pie. Sophie sighed. Evan Porter, you may yet make a decent boyfriend. Boyfriend? I smiled into her hair. I'll try to live up to the title. The inn had yellow porch lights, a hand-painted sign, and a front desk clerk who looked at Sophie's wedding dress, my loosened tie, and our single overnight bag from the back of my truck. Then she said, Rough reception? Sophie smiled sweetly. You could say the groom underperformed. The clerk's pen froze. I put my credit card on the counter. 1 room, please. Sophie leaned into my side, preferably with no towel swans. The clerk recovered like a professional. We have pie downstairs until 10. Sophie touched my arm. Marry him. The clerk pointed at me. Him? No, the pie. I was still laughing when we got the key. The room was small and old-fashioned, with floral wallpaper, a brass bed, and a clawfoot tub visible through the half-open bathroom door. A plate with 2 slices of apple pie waited on the dresser like someone had known we were coming. Sophie stepped inside and stopped. For the first time all evening, there was no audience, no aisle, no mother, no ex-fiancé buzzing in her phone. Just us. The quiet landed gently, but it landed. I shut the door. You okay? She turned toward me. Her face was tired beneath the leftover makeup, but her eyes were bright. I'm in a wedding dress, in a bed and breakfast, with my best friend, who proposed to me in front of my entire family after my fiancé ran away. Right. So no, her mouth curved. But also, maybe yes. I'll take maybe yes. She looked down at herself. I need out of this dress. My brain lost power. Sophie watched my face and laughed softly. Breathe, Porter. I meant there are buttons. Approximately 9,000 of them. Buttons, sure, I'm excellent with buttons. You just walked into the dresser. I did that intentionally. She turned her back to me, sweeping her hair over one shoulder. The dress dipped low between her shoulder blades. The first pearl button sat at the nape of her neck. My hands were steady with chisels, saws, antique hinges. They were not steady now. Tell me if you want me to stop, I said. Sophie's voice softened. I won't. I undid the first button, then the next. The room seemed to shrink around the sound of our breathing. My fingers brushed the warm skin of her back and she shivered. Cold? I asked. No. The word was barely there. Every button felt like a promise I had no right to rush. When I reached the middle of her back, Sophie looked over her shoulder. You're being very careful. I'm trying not to be a terrible person. You're not. She turned slowly, holding the front of the dress to her chest. You're the man who remembered I hate being stared at when I cry. That's a low bar. No. She stepped closer. It isn't. Her free hand rose to my jaw. I didn't kiss her. Not yet. I let her decide the distance. She closed it. This kiss was different in the quiet room. Slower. Deeper. Her thumb moved along my throat and my hand settled at her waist over satin that had loosened under my fingers. When she drew back, her eyes were wet again. I don't want Trevor to be the last man who touched this dress, she whispered. My chest tightened, so I kissed her forehead. Then let this be the last moment the dress matters. A shaky laugh escaped her. That was annoyingly beautiful. I can ruin it with a soup joke. Don't you dare. I stepped into the bathroom and came back with the inn's white robe, holding it out without looking until she laughed. You can look, Evan. I'm being respectful. You are being Victorian. I contain multitudes. She took the robe. A minute later, satin pooled on the floor, and Sophie stood barefoot in white cotton, her hair coming loose around her shoulders. She looked more like herself than she had all day, and somehow more beautiful. Your turn, she said. My turn? The tie, it's tragic. She reached for me, undoing the knot with far more confidence than I had managed with her buttons. Her fingers brushed my collar, then slid the tie free. There, she murmured. Less groomsman, more Evan. Is that an improvement? The only one I wanted. We ate pie on the bed with our legs crossed, the television off, the world held outside by thin curtains. Sophie stole the bigger bite from my fork. That was mine, I said. Boyfriend tax. I've been promoted quickly. Probationary boyfriend. What are the job requirements? She pretended to think. Pie sharing, no emotional disappearing, occasional heavy lifting, kissing competency. How am I doing? Her smile turned soft. Exceeding expectations. Then her phone buzzed again on the nightstand. The spell dimmed, but did not break. Sophie stared at it. Trevor's name glowed on the screen. I should answer once, she said. My instinct was to say no, to stand between her and whatever he wanted, but she didn't need a guard dog. She needed a man who trusted her strength. So I nodded. I'm here. She picked up. Trevor. I could hear only the thin murmur of his voice. Sophie's shoulders stiffened. No, you don't get to call it panic like that makes it tidy. More murmuring. You humiliated me, she said, voice shaking, but clear. But you also freed me from making the safer mistake. I looked down at my hands. She was silent for a moment. Then she said, No, I'm not alone. My breath stopped. Her eyes found mine. I'm with Evan, she said. And before you decide what that means, understand something. He didn't steal me, he saw me. There's a difference. Trevor's voice rose enough that I heard the anger, if not the words. Sophie flinched. I stood. She lifted one hand, not pushing me away, just asking me to wait, choosing to finish it herself. I'll arrange to return your things next week, she said. Do not come to my apartment tonight, do not call my parents, and don't turn your regret into my emergency. She hung up. For a few seconds, she sat very still. Then her face crumpled. I was beside her before I thought about moving. She reached for me at the same time, arms wrapping around my waist, cheek pressed to my shirt. I held her carefully at first. Then she whispered, "Tighter." So I held her tighter. She cried without apology. Not dramatically, just enough to let the day leave marks. "I hate that it still hurts," she said. "I know. I hate that part of me wants an explanation." "That doesn't mean you want him." "I don't." She lifted her face. "I need you to know that." "I do." "No, Evan." She gripped my shirt. "I chose you in the aisle because I wanted you, not because he left a vacancy." The words sank into me, deep and permanent. I bent until our foreheads touched. "I have been trying not to want you for years." "How'd that go?" "Poorly." Her laugh broke through the tears. I brushed one away with my thumb. "I'm done pretending." "Good." She leaned into my hand. "Because tomorrow is going to be messy." "Probably." "My mother will make brunch emotionally dangerous." "Expected." "Aunt Judith will have a photo album by sunrise." "Terrifying." "And everyone will ask what we are." I swallowed. "What do you want to say?" Sophie looked at me for a long, quiet moment. Then she climbed into my lap. My hands went to her hips automatically, and she settled there like she had belonged there all along. "I want to say," she whispered, "that we're beginning." I kissed her then, not to erase the hurt, but to meet her inside it. She kissed me back with both hands in my hair, warm and certain and alive. Later we lay under the quilt fully clothed, her robe sleeve twisted around my wrist, her head on my chest. "Evan?" she murmured. "Yeah?" "If you sleep on the floor, I'll dump pie filling in your shoes." "I'm in the bed." "Good." After a while, her breathing evened out. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, one hand resting over hers. At 2 in the morning, my phone lit up. A message from an unknown number. "You think you won. She'll come back when she remembers what you are." I read it once. Then I turned the phone face down and pulled Sophie closer. Whatever tomorrow brought, I would not let fear be the loudest thing in the room. Not anymore. In the morning, Sophie woke with her cheek on my chest and one knee hooked over my leg like she had been sleeping beside me for years. For several minutes, I did not move. Sunlight slipped through the curtains. Her hair was tangled across my shirt. The inn was quiet except for birds outside and the old pipes clicking in the walls. Then her eyes opened. She blinked at me. I braced for regret. Sophie smiled sleepily and said, "You snore like a tired lawnmower." Relief hit me so hard I laughed. "I do not." "You do, but quietly, like a polite appliance." "I'll work on it." "Good. Probationary boyfriend status requires improvement." She stretched, then seemed to remember everything at once. The dress, the aisle, Trevor, me. Her smile faded, but she did not pull away. "Morning after," she whispered. "Yeah." "Still here?" I touched her hair, gentle. "Still here." Her eyes searched mine. "Still choosing me?" I hated that she had to ask. I loved that she trusted me enough to. "Still choosing you," I said. "Not because of yesterday, not because of him, because of every Tuesday night grocery run, every emergency pancake breakfast, every time you fell asleep during a movie and denied it." I rest my eyes. "You snore like a hostile tea kettle," she gasped. "Slander." I kissed her before she could argue more. It was a morning kiss, soft and slow, with pie sugar still faint on her lips and sunlight warming her shoulder through the robe. When she pulled back, she looked steadier. Then my phone buzzed on the nightstand. The unknown message was still there. Sophie saw my face change. "What?" I hesitated. Her eyebrows lifted. "Rule 2, no noble disappearing. Also, no hiding weird phone faces." I handed it to her. She read the message once. Her mouth tightened. "You think you won." She'll come back when she remembers what you are. She sat up slowly. Trevor? Probably. Did you answer? No. Good. She gave me back the phone. He doesn't get the first word today. What do you want to do? She looked surprised by the question, then pleased in a sad way. I want breakfast. I want coffee. I want my mother not to cry into eggs. And then I want to block his number. That sounds like a plan. And I want you next to me when everyone asks. I took her hand. Done. At brunch, Mrs. Bennet did cry into eggs. Aunt Judith had indeed printed photos. Mr. Bennet hugged me so hard my spine made a sound. The Hales did not come. Sophie wore jeans her sister brought from her apartment, my flannel over a camisole, and the pearl necklace from the wedding. She looked like someone who had walked through fire and come out annoyed at the smoke damage. When people asked what we were, she slid her fingers through mine under the table. Then, on the third question, she lifted our joined hands onto the table where everyone could see. We're beginning, she said. My chest went tight. Her mother cried harder. Aunt Judith whispered, Called it. The weeks after were not a fairy tale. They were better and harder than that. Sophie canceled vendors, returned gifts, cried in the produce aisle once because she saw the brand of sparkling water Trevor liked, and laughed 10 minutes later because I tried to comfort her by offering an eggplant. That is not a healing vegetable, she told me. I panicked. You often do, but charmingly. Trevor sent 2 more messages before she blocked him. 1 apology, 1 accusation. Neither changed anything. What did change things was the ordinary stuff. I learned Sophie hated being asked, Are you okay? Too often, but liked having tea placed silently near her elbow. She learned I cleaned when anxious, and began deliberately leaving 1 mug in the sink just to see if my eye twitched. We dated like people making up for lost time. Pizza on my porch. A terrible museum exhibit where she spent 20 minutes roasting a painting of a horse. Slow dances in her kitchen without thunder. A weekend in Charleston where she kissed me in front of a fountain and said, See, this is what a planned romantic moment looks like. I told her I loved her in a hardware store because she was comparing cabinet knobs with deadly seriousness and I couldn't hold it in anymore. She turned, holding a brass handle shaped like a leaf, and said, That was badly timed. I know. Say it again. I love you, her eyes filled. Better. Then she kissed me between plumbing fixtures and outdoor lighting while an employee pretended not to watch. By winter, she had a drawer at my house. By spring, my house had fewer unfinished projects because Sophie made a spreadsheet titled Evan's Structural Emotional Avoidance. It's about the porch, I said. It is never just about the porch. She was right. A year after that day at the winery, we went back. Not to relive it, not to prove anything to Trevor, who had moved away by then and become someone we rarely mentioned. We went because Sophie said the mountains were beautiful and she refused to let one coward own the view. This time there were no guests, no quartet, no phones rising in the air, just us beneath the same white arch, now half covered in summer vines. Sophie wore a blue dress and sandals. I wore the charcoal suit again, properly tailored this time, because she had threatened to attack it with fabric scissors. The officiant was the same woman from the first ceremony. When she saw us, she smiled and said, Legally speaking, we can do it this time. Sophie laughed so hard she had to wipe her eyes. Her father walked her down the aisle again, but this time her face held no crooked, breaking smile. This time, when she reached me, she grinned. Hi, she whispered. Hi. Still choosing me? I took both her hands. Every honest minute. Her lips trembled. Good, she said. Because I bought fewer peonies this time and I'd hate to waste them. We said vows we had written ourselves. Hers included the phrase, broth with parsley is not soup. Mine included a solemn promise never to confuse silence with peace again. When the officiant pronounced us married, Sophie didn't wait. She grabbed my lapels and kissed me like she had been waiting 11 years and 1 impossible year more. Behind us, our families cheered. Aunt Judith definitely took pictures. Mrs. Bennet sobbed into a handkerchief. Mr. Bennet yelled, About time! And denied it later. That night, after the reception, after the dancing, after Sophie smeared cake frosting on my chin and then kissed it off before I could complain, we slipped away to the vineyard path. The sun had set. The fairy lights glowed over the rows of grapes. Sophie kicked off her sandals and took my hand. "Remember when you said, 'Then I'll marry her?'" she asked. I remember almost passing out afterward. I didn't know a person could be humiliated and hopeful at the same time. She leaned into me. "You gave me a door when I thought the room had collapsed. You opened it." She smiled. "We did." Then my wife stood on her toes and kissed me under the lights, her fingers laced with mine, her laugh warm against my mouth. And this time, when we walked away from that altar, nobody was running. We were going home. What would you have done if your best friend was left at the altar and you were the one secretly in love with her? Have you ever experienced anything even close to that, losing one future and finding another in the same moment? Tell me your story in the comments. If you liked this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.